You are listening Finish What You Start by Peter Hollins, narrated by Litnarrate. Welcome to Litnarrate. Sit back and enjoy classic literature brought to life through narration. Let me ask you something. How many unfinished projects are sitting in your life right now, gathering dust like an old canoe in a garage? A half-written book, an abandoned business idea, a gym membership you barely use, a language app you have not opened in months. Here is the uncomfortable truth. It is almost never a lack of talent or intelligence that stops us. It is something far sneakier. It is our own brain working against us in ways we do not even notice. By the end of this episode, you will understand exactly why you sabotage your own goals, and more importantly, you will walk away with real, usable tools to finally become someone who finishes what they start. So let us get into it. Picture someone named Esther. She hates her 9-to-5. She dreams of running her own baking business from home. One day she finally takes the leap, sort of. She takes a 2-week vacation to, quote, figure it all out. She plans to research everything: recipes, finance, marketing, taxes. But here is what actually happens. She sleeps in. She catches up with friends. She avoids telling anyone about her plan because she is terrified they will expect her to fail, or worse, expect her to succeed. 2 weeks pass. She has done nothing. She goes back to the job she hates, and the dream goes right back into the fantasy drawer. Sound familiar? Esther is not lazy in the way we usually think of laziness. She is not incapable. She is missing something specific, something the author calls following through. And following through is not one single skill. Think of it like 4 different components fusing together, like some kind of mental Voltron. The first piece is focus, which is basically your head, keeping your eyes on the actual prize instead of getting distracted by every shiny object in the room. The second piece is self-discipline, which acts like your spine, keeping you upright and doing the work even when you really do not feel like it. The third piece is action, your hands and feet, the part that actually moves you from where you are to where you want to be. And the fourth piece is persistence, your heart, the thing that keeps you going when obstacles show up, because they always do. Here is the key insight. You need all 4. Miss even one, and the whole thing collapses. Esther had the dream. She even had some focus. But she had 0 self-discipline around her free time. She took almost no action. And since she never really started, persistence was never even tested. She was not persistent or unpersistent. She simply never got far enough to find out. Now, why does this happen to basically everyone? The book breaks it into 2 big categories. The first category is what we might call self-sabotage tactics, meaning the sneaky ways we waste our own time and energy without even realizing it. The second category is deeper, psychological roadblocks, the fears and insecurities running quietly in the background of your mind. Let us talk about the sabotage tactics first, because honestly, this is where most of us live day to day. Tactic number 1 is setting bad goals. If your goal is something vague like, I want to get healthier, you have basically set yourself up to fail before you even begin, because there is no clear finish line and no clear next step. On the flip side, if your goal is wildly unrealistic, like doubling a factory's entire output overnight with no new resources, you also fail, except this time you get to blame the impossible goal instead of yourself. Either way, vague or impossible, you get an excuse to never really try. Tactic number 2, and this is a big one, is procrastination. Not the obvious kind where you binge watch a show instead of working. The sneaky kind. The kind disguised as productivity. This is what the author calls productive procrastination. You spend hours planning, researching, tweaking your to-do list, reorganizing your Notion workspace for the 5th time this month, and it feels like progress. It feels like you are being responsible. But if you strip it down, you are just moving in place. You are polishing the map instead of walking the road. Tactic number 3 is temptation and distraction. Your phone buzzes. A little red notification dot appears, and suddenly your brain gets a small hit of dopamine just from that tiny visual cue, and boom, you are down a rabbit hole for 45 minutes. The book does not say distractions are evil and must be eliminated forever. Instead, it offers a smarter approach: strategic avoidance paired with scheduled indulgence. meaning block out real distraction-free time, but also give yourself permission for short, timed breaks to check social media guilt-free. The goal is not becoming a monk. The goal is managing the trade-off intelligently. Tactic number 4 is poor time management. And this one is subtle because most people who struggle with time management do not actually lack time. They lack the judgment to know which tasks deserve their time in the first place. Now let us shift to the psychological roadblocks, the internal stuff. This is where things get a little more personal and honestly a little more uncomfortable because these are the mental habits hiding underneath the surface excuses. The first roadblock is straightforward laziness and lack of discipline. Sometimes the honest answer really is that simple. You know what to do, you have the calendar, the to-do list, everything laid out, and you just do not do it because the sacrifice does not feel worth it in that exact moment. The second roadblock is fear of judgment, rejection, and failure. There is a woman in the book named Lara. She volunteers for a charity helping underprivileged kids, and she has a genuinely great idea for a fundraiser. But right before she makes the first phone call to get things moving, she freezes. What if nobody signs up? What if the campaign flops in front of everyone? So she quietly drops the whole idea and immediately feels relief. That relief is the trap. By never trying, she protects herself from ever being rejected. But here is the sharp truth the book points out. By not trying, she has already failed and already rejected herself. She just did it quietly, without anyone else even knowing there was a contest to lose. The third roadblock is perfectionism rooted in insecurity. There is a character named Paul who wants a promotion at work. He keeps taking extra courses, extra certifications, endlessly polishing his resume because he wants it to be perfect before he applies. Years go by. He never applies. His skills were never actually the problem. His fear of not being good enough was the problem, and it disguised itself as diligence. The fourth roadblock is lack of self-awareness. This is the quiet one. If you do not know how you work best, when your energy peaks, what actually drains you, you will keep repeating the same failed patterns without ever understanding why, and you will not even realize you are stuck in a loop. So now that we know why we fail to follow through, let us talk about what actually fixes it, because this is where the book gets genuinely practical. First, let us talk about motivation, because staying hungry for a goal is harder than it sounds, even when you deeply care about the outcome. There is a story in the book about a woman named Sally who starts a charity because she genuinely wants to help people, but she quickly gets buried in the unglamorous side of running a nonprofit. Grant writing, competing for donations, endless paperwork. Within months, she is completely burned out and quits a cause she once loved. Her mistake was relying purely on passion. Passion alone is fragile. It cannot survive contact with boring, difficult, tedious work. The book splits motivation into two types, external and internal. External motivators come from outside pressure, avoiding embarrassment, avoiding financial loss, accountability to another person. Internal motivators come from within, your own sense of purpose, pride, and personal benefit. Here is a great real-world example of an external motivator. Say you commit to a friend that you will run a 5-kilometer race together. Now, quitting your training does not just affect you, it affects them too, and the fear of letting someone down can be a shockingly powerful engine, way stronger than trying to rely on willpower alone. There is also a wonderfully simple strategy called putting money down. If you pay for an expensive course up front, you suddenly feel a strong pull to finish it, purely because you do not want to feel like you wasted that money. This is exactly why so many people finish an expensive boot camp, but never finish that free online course they downloaded for nothing. And here is a fascinating study mentioned in the book. Researchers gave people a simple task and told them to pick up paper clips afterward as proof of completion. One group was just told where to find the paper clips. The other group was told the paper clips would be sitting next to a large, unusual elephant statue. The elephant statue group remembered to complete the task 74% of the time. The plain instruction group only remembered 42% of the time. The lesson here is powerful. Vivid, unusual, memorable cues stick in your brain far better than plain reminders ever will. So if you want to remember to meditate every morning, do not just write meditate on a sticky note. Put your yoga mat somewhere genuinely strange and visually loud, somewhere you cannot possibly ignore it. Next, let us talk about building your own personal rulebook, or what the author calls a manifesto. The idea here is brilliantly simple. Every single day you face small decision points, little forks in the road, where you could either push forward or quietly give up. If you have to consciously debate every single one of these moments using willpower alone, you will lose eventually, because willpower is a limited resource that drains throughout the day. But if you have a pre-decided rule, there is no debate. The decision is already made for you in advance. Here is one of the most effective rules from the book. Limit yourself to 3 major tasks per day, only 3. This forces you to separate what is actually important from what merely feels urgent. For example, replying instantly to every email feels urgent, but finishing a major project for a client is what is actually important. Confusing these two categories is one of the most common reasons people feel busy all day, yet accomplish almost nothing meaningful. Another rule from the book is what we can call the 10-10-10 framework. Before giving into a temptation, or right before giving up on something worthwhile, ask yourself how you will feel about this choice in 10 minutes, in 10 hours, and in 10 days. Let us say you are trying to build a consistent workout habit, and you are tempted to skip today's session to grab drinks with friends instead. In 10 minutes, skipping feels fantastic. You are enjoying good company. In 10 hours, you might feel a small pang of regret. In 10 days, if this becomes a pattern, you will likely feel real disappointment in yourself for breaking a habit you were building. This exercise forces your brain to briefly step into the shoes of your future self before your present self makes an impulsive decision. There is also a wonderfully simple rule called just 10 minutes. If you desperately want to quit something, force yourself to wait just 10 more minutes before quitting. If you badly want to indulge in something unproductive, force yourself to wait just 10 minutes before doing it. Often, the urge fades entirely once those 10 minutes pass. And on the flip side, if you are dreading starting a task, tell yourself you only have to do it for 10 minutes. Once you get moving, momentum frequently carries you far beyond that original 10-minute commitment. Now let us talk about mindset, because the book argues that following through is almost entirely a mental game. One key mindset shift is learning to become comfortable with discomfort. Nearly everything worth achieving requires you to sit with some level of awkwardness, fear, or friction. Think about learning a new language. The first few conversations are painfully clumsy and embarrassing, but the discomfort is temporary while the skill you gain lasts. People who quit early are simply people who never gave themselves the chance to get used to that initial discomfort. Another critical mindset is treating every attempt as a learning experience rather than a pass or fail test. If you launch a small business and it does not succeed, you still walk away having learned an enormous amount about marketing, finances, and yourself. That knowledge has real, lasting value, even if the specific venture did not work out the way you had hoped. Now let us dig into procrastination specifically, because the book offers one of the most useful psychological explanations you will ever hear for why we constantly delay important tasks. It comes down to something called time inconsistency. Essentially, you have two competing versions of yourself. Your present self wants comfort and pleasure right now. Your future self wants long-term rewards and genuinely cares about your bigger goals. The problem is that only your present self actually has the power to take action in this exact moment. Your future self can dream and plan all day long, but cannot lift a single finger to make it happen. The single best solution the book offers for this conflict is something called temptation bundling. This means deliberately pairing something you genuinely enjoy with something you know you should be doing, but keep avoiding. For example, only allow yourself to watch your favorite show while on the treadmill. Only let yourself enjoy a fancy coffee while working through your least favorite task at work. You are essentially bribing your present self into cooperating with your future self's long-term goals. Another wildly effective procrastination strategy is breaking tasks down into embarrassingly small steps. If writing an entire book chapter feels overwhelming, do not aim for the chapter. Aim for writing just 100 words. That is genuinely such a small commitment that your brain cannot reasonably talk you out of it. And once you get moving, momentum very often carries you far past that tiny original goal. Now let us talk about distractions, because in the age of smartphones, this deserves its own serious spotlight. There was a fascinating study mentioned in the book involving jars of chocolate candies. Researchers placed jars either close to people's desks or roughly 6 feet away, and the jars were either clear or opaque. People sitting near a clear jar ate significantly more candy than people with an opaque jar sitting the same distance away. Just seeing the temptation dramatically increased how often people gave into it. The lesson translates directly to modern life. If your phone is sitting face up right next to your keyboard, you will check it constantly without even consciously deciding to. But if you put your phone in another room entirely, you dramatically reduce how often you give in, simply because the effort required to reach it increased. This connects to another powerful concept from the book called the default effect. There was a striking study across several European countries regarding organ donation. In countries where citizens were automatically enrolled as donors unless they actively opted out, participation rates were above 95%. In countries where citizens had to actively opt in, participation rates were often below 30%. The actual desire to donate organs was likely similar across these countries. What changed everything was simply which choice required more effort. We are wired to take the path of least resistance, so use that tendency to your advantage. If you want to eat healthier, do not keep chips in the house at all. Keep fruit visible on the counter instead. If you want to read more, keep a physical book on your nightstand instead of your phone charger. The book also introduces a fascinating concept called attention residue. This explains why rapidly switching between different tasks throughout your day leaves you feeling foggy and drained, even if you never technically did two things at the exact same literal moment. When you jump from writing an email straight into a video call and then straight into a spreadsheet, a small mental residue from each previous task lingers and quietly interferes with your focus on the next one. The solution the book recommends is called batching, which means grouping similar tasks together. Answer all your emails during one dedicated block of time. Make all your phone calls together. Do all your creative writing work together. This allows your brain to stay in one consistent mode of thinking instead of constantly shifting gears, which conserves an enormous amount of mental energy over the course of a day. There is also a wonderfully practical concept called the don't-do list. Most people are extremely familiar with to-do lists, but very few people ever consciously write down what they should specifically avoid doing. The book suggests 3 categories worth avoiding. First, tasks that are currently stuck waiting on someone else's response, so there is genuinely nothing more you can do right now. Second, small busy work tasks that do not meaningfully move your bigger goals forward. And third, tasks that have already reached diminishing returns, meaning additional polishing would cost you far more time than the improvement is actually worth. This connects beautifully to a decision-making principle borrowed from former United States Secretary of State Colin Powell, called the 40-70 rule. The idea is that you should take action once you have somewhere between 40% and 70% of the information you would ideally like to have. Below 40%, you are genuinely guessing blindly, but above 70%, you are usually just stalling, dressed up as diligent research. Waiting for total certainty means you will frequently miss your window of opportunity entirely, because someone less cautious moved first while you were still gathering research. Now let us talk about specific pitfalls that quietly derail people, because these show up constantly in everyday life. The first pitfall is called false hope syndrome. This happens when you set wildly unrealistic expectations for how quickly and easily you can change. Think about someone who quits their steady job to start freelancing, fully expecting instant freedom, endless free time, and effortless income within the very first month. When reality inevitably turns out to be slower and considerably harder, the disappointment can crush their motivation entirely, sometimes even worse than if they had never started at all. The second pitfall is overthinking, which the book memorably describes as something that mimics real progress without actually being progress. There is a wonderfully relatable example involving buying a printer at a big box store. You stand there facing an entire wall of printers, each one boasting different features, and you become so overwhelmed by the sheer number of options that you either grab the very first one in a moment of panic, or you leave empty-handed entirely despite genuinely needing one. The fix is refreshingly simple. Decide on just 2 or 3 criteria that actually matter to you in advance, and then choose the very first option that satisfies those specific criteria. Stop treating every single decision like it deserves a doctoral thesis worth of research. The third pitfall is worry, which is closely related to overthinking but focuses specifically on imagined negative outcomes rather than practical decision paralysis. The book makes a sharp and memorable point here. Worrying makes you suffer twice, once during all that anxious anticipation, and then again if the feared event actually happens. And if the feared event never even happens at all, you suffered for absolutely nothing. The fourth pitfall is failing to genuinely know yourself. Not everyone thrives under the exact same conditions or schedule. Some people do their best, sharpest thinking early in the morning. Others feel completely foggy until well after lunch and only truly come alive late at night. Forcing yourself into someone else's ideal schedule just because it worked well for them is a surprisingly common and deeply frustrating way to sabotage your own natural rhythm and productivity. Finally, let us talk about systems, because this might genuinely be the single most important idea in the entire book. There is a memorable story about a man named Ned who starts his own consulting business. At first, everything goes smoothly, but as his workload steadily grows, he becomes completely overwhelmed. He has no organized system in place, so he is constantly relying purely on raw willpower to keep up, and eventually he simply burns out entirely. His inbox piles up, clients start losing patience with him, and negative reviews begin appearing on his profile. The core lesson here is genuinely profound. Goals are one-time destinations, but systems are the daily process that actually gets you there consistently, even on the days when your motivation is running low or your willpower feels completely tapped out. If Ned had simply built a repeatable morning routine, batched his emails into 2 dedicated time blocks per day, and used simple software tools to automate his invoicing process, he could have handled significantly more work with drastically less personal stress and exhaustion. One especially fun system mentioned in the book is called keeping a scoreboard. Human beings are naturally wired to feel more motivated when they can visibly see themselves winning at something. This is exactly why a simple to-do list with satisfying check marks feels so surprisingly motivating, and why some people track visible daily streaks for habits like exercising, reading, or meditating. The simple act of watching your own progress accumulate becomes its own powerful source of built-in motivation. Another valuable system is called lowering your transaction costs. This means deliberately making good habits as effortless as humanly possible, while simultaneously making bad habits as inconvenient as possible. If you want to eat healthier, wash and pre-cut your vegetables in advance so they are as easy to grab as any convenient junk food. If you want to spend noticeably less time mindlessly scrolling social media, delete the app entirely and force yourself to log in only through a slow, clunky web browser instead. You are not relying on raw willpower here. You are cleverly engineering your environment so that the easy path and the productive path become the very same path. So let us bring this all together. Following through is genuinely not about being a naturally gifted superhuman person with limitless willpower. It is about deeply understanding the very specific ways your own brain quietly works against you, and then building smart, deliberate systems that route directly around those predictable weaknesses. It is about designing your environment intelligently instead of relying purely on motivation, which will inevitably rise and fall like ocean tides throughout any given week. It is about setting realistic, achievable expectations instead of chasing unrealistic dreams doomed to painfully collapse under their own excessive weight. And ultimately, it is about recognizing that every single unfinished project sitting quietly in your life is not really evidence that you are somehow broken or fundamentally lazy. It is simply evidence that the right system was never actually in place to carry you all the way through to completion. So here is a genuine challenge for you as you finish listening to this episode today. Think of exactly one thing you have been meaningfully putting off. Do not choose 10 things. Choose just one. Now apply just one single tool from everything we covered here today. Maybe you finally set a firm, specific 10-minute starting point. Maybe you clear a single visible distraction from your immediate physical environment. Maybe you tell one trusted friend about your goal, so you now have genuine built-in accountability. Small, deliberate actions like these compound remarkably over time, and one single day of genuinely following through has a real tendency to quietly become 2 days, and then a full week, and eventually an entirely new and much more capable version of yourself. Thank you for listening to Litnarrate. If you enjoyed this classic tale, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more timeless literature brought to life through narration. See you in the next story.